What are some hard-to-swallow pills about relationships? It's not anyone else's job to make sure I'm happy in a relationship, especially theirs. That's unrealistic expectations placed on a partner. My happiness is my choice and my responsibility to communicate my needs and work with my partner. Same for them. Many great relationships were lost because one side felt it was the other side's job to make sure they're happy all the time. Relationships are tough because they involve imperfect people. The cliche, "it shouldn't be this hard," is a myth and has sunk some great connections with the new wears off and real life sets in. Find internal peace and health within yourself, and only then can you truly help make another person better by adding your strengths to theirs. It's not about happiness. That's so surface level and immature. It's about way more than that when it's actually real and time tested. Focus on being in a healthy relationship, not a happy one. And a whole new world you never knew existed will open up for you and your partner. Spoiler alert, when you're healthy, there are way more happy days, and the tough ones aren't as tough because you aren't doing it alone. Love isn't a feeling. It's an intentional way of life that far supersedes feelings. It's about commitment, contentment, service, and selflessness. You don't wake up in love, you earn it over time. I'm only 8 years into a healthy marriage with 3 kids. I don't have it all figured out, but I'm excited to take on the challenge every day to not let something as petty and fleeting as feelings dictate how I approach a lifelong commitment to someone. Who deserves more than I can give them on my own without their grace and support? My hope and prayer is that right before we have our notebook ending, I can look over and say, "That was fun, huh?" And she will say, "Yep." And then we fade to black. Just being happy all the time won't get you there. There's your hard pill to swallow. So he's saying love is more like a workout than a vacation. A bit of sweat and tears, but ultimately rewarding. Story 2. You need to learn how to communicate. Movies have a background music to indicate MC that his or her SO is upset or going through crap. Life isn't like that. You need to tell your partner that you're facing some sort of problem. Otherwise, don't go around gaslighting them that you didn't understand it was in trouble, so you're at fault. Secondly, relationships are work in some days. You're having a bad day at the office, and suddenly your SO is being all cranky because someone in their family said some crap to them. You need to learn how to compromise in these few days. Not just you alone, of course. And the compromise could be like, "Hey, I'm sorry to know your XX did XX to you. How about I take a bit of a break? You vent to me, and after my job, we'll just chill around." Some or the other day, you or your partner are going to be very difficult to deal with, and that's okay. It's natural, and stuff happens. The work here is not to get affected too much by it because you might feel like your problems are much more important than your SO, but that's not the case. You're both equally here in this, not you as a solo. Thirdly, romance ends if you let it. I'll repeat it for the people in the back. Romance ends if you let it. Flirt with your significant other. Send them a cute text. Call them names. Be cute in public. Not too much with each other, please. Holding hands would do. Surprise your significant other with something small. Do little things together. Otherwise, it will become a drag and eventually a boring relationship, which ain't going nowhere. I was in the same situation, and other than just going out on dates, we had nothing left to look forward to, and dates were not much fun as my significant other was like, "I don't like to call you cringe names which sound cute." Neither did he flirt because he was incapable. I lost interest soon. Lastly, relationships are a part of your life, not your life. Don't give up everything for this, which may or may not lead somewhere. Just try to have fun and hope for the best. If you make it your life, you'll center all your decisions around your partner, and honey, that would become a toxic relationship. So let's just not. Story 3. Cheating is really common, and not everyone has the same definition of what it even is. Don't assume you're on the same page. Talk about your boundaries early on and check in regularly throughout the relationship. Don't assume you both think of monogamy the same way. Better yet, don't assume monogamy is the default relationship arrangement. Monogamy isn't natural or easy for any human being, regardless of gender, and it doesn't matter how much you love them or they love you. If the only thing that makes your relationship special is that you are each the only person the other one is sleeping with, then it might not be all that special. But in the US, we built up a ton of pressure and stigma around this one specific part of what relationships are, and it causes so much unnecessary pain, shame, and suffering. If you've been cheated on, you may have felt like you weren't good enough. And if only you were thinner, funnier, more exciting, more fit, stronger, whatever, then your partner wouldn't have done it. But that's got nothing to do with it. The most beautiful celebrities in the world get cheated on all the time. The whole tabloid industry basically depends on it to exist. Sometimes it just comes down purely to desire for variety. You wouldn't expect to be the be-all, end-all only person your partner needs for everything in life and other areas. Their one and only friend, their one and only emotional support, their only family. And in the US especially, we stick our heads in the sand about this, but for a lot of people, if we're being honest with ourselves, that need for support and fulfillment from more than just one person would extend to their needs and desires too. Am I saying you should just accept cheating? No. Just because something is a social construct, a norm we reinforce, doesn't mean the pain that crossing that line causes isn't real. And you and your partner should be considerate of that. Am I saying everyone should be in an open relationship, whether they find that comfortable or appealing or not? Also, no. But I am saying that you should not enter a relationship making assumptions about this as we tend to. Again, especially in the US. Can't speak for everywhere. If at the very least, asking about someone's feelings about monogamy and intimate needs was common and we felt free to answer without fear and shame, and without worrying an answer that didn't perfectly conform to current norms would get you publicly shamed online, then I think a lot more people could enter relationships with clear eyes and it would lead to healthier, more trusting bonds. Even if you're open to a degree of non-exclusiveness, that doesn't mean that you can't be somewhat fluid and change and adapt with your life, your needs, and your relationship over time. I also don't think there's no room to want to be totally exclusive, but that should be part of early dating conversations in the same way you ask about wanting kids, life and career goals, religious beliefs, worldviews and values, and all of that. But even if you find a romantic partner who's 100% on the same page about being totally monogamous when you start, it's still healthier to be realistic about certain things. Attraction to other people is going to happen in any long-term relationship. You and your partner may, at times, feel strong urges to have intimacy with other people. That doesn't necessarily mean anything is wrong with your relationship or that you don't love each other and aren't attracted to each other. In a healthy, mature relationship, you would ideally, in a perfect world without all the pressures we're under when it comes to Disney fantasy world ideas of love and fidelity, be able to talk about those urges without fear or shame. If cheating happens, it probably has nothing to do with you, no more than getting lunch with a friend or going to a movie with a cousin. Story 4. At some point, you may find that your family, parents or siblings, not your own kids, is not compatible with your relationship with your partner or vice versa. There may come a time where your family may interfere directly or indirectly with your relationship and make it very difficult to maintain a positive, supportive relationship with everyone. For example, your family may not like your partner for any number of reasons, some serious, some stupid or superficial. That doesn't mean your partner is incompatible with you. And it doesn't mean it's impossible to continue with your partner either. Of course, your decisions about how to deal with it depends on how important your family's relationship is to you, and how this might play out over the long term. In my case, I've seen the full spectrum on this, where unless the family fell in love with your partner like you did, then it's not going to work out. On the other hand, more like myself, I'm not super close to my family and their opinion about who I'm with really doesn't have any impact on me or them. Story 5. You're going to hurt each other. There seems to be this attitude online that if your partner ever does anything to hurt you, you leave them. No talking it out, no trying therapy, you just leave them. Obviously, there are some things that are not justifiable and a breakup is the best option, but it just isn't realistic to expect that you're going to date, get married, and grow old together without ever doing something to hurt each other. Think of it like this. You've probably gotten into a big fight by most of the members of your family at least once. When you live together and spend all your time together, it's kind of unavoidable. If you're going to be in a long-term relationship with this person, they're going to be your family. So you need to look at it like that. Maybe we should all just live alone with our cats. At least they won't break our hearts. Story 6. The soulmate feeling fades and does not guarantee happiness or a forever after type of love. You will have to choose to keep loving them as time goes by. The quality that attracted you to them eventually turns you off. The more you have to forgive them, the less you love them. You're going to want to leave at a few points in the relationship. They are going to be attracted to other people while in a relationship with you, as will you. Attraction to outsiders is natural and unavoidable. What you choose to do with that attraction strengthens or poisons the relationship. You have to keep readjusting your expectations of them if you wish to stay together forever. You will feel lonely even though they are with you. Your partner may not want to grow in the ways you need them to grow. Physically injured partners may require much more mental and emotional support and reassurance than you are able to give. You may not be able to reach them. Unemployed partners may not want to get a job. You're going to feel stuck at some points in the relationship. Story 7. Love is a lot like growing your hair out. It starts as a fresh AF new cut and you can't get enough of it. You look at it in every reflection, post pics all the time of it, talk about it too much with your friends. Then as it grows, you see more texture and how the new growth meshes so well with what you had left from the last cut. Then there's a middling phase where things can get, well, ugly. It doesn't do what you wanted it to all the time anymore. It's harder to maintain and keep up. You get sick of the work it takes to make it look how you want it. Sometimes it's just awful and you just want to cover it up. Stop looking at it. Forget it's there. If you stick with it though, one day you look at it the right angle and realize this is what you've been building. Suddenly, it's much easier to manage because you've grown accustomed to its style. You know right where it's going to fall and when it needs to be cleaned up and brushed until all the knots are gone. Now you can dive into it and see how many ways you even more you or throw it up in a sloppy pony and clean the toilet while you sing 90s all together. Okay, the hair thing doesn't work with the singing, but you get it. Now when you look back in the ugly phase, you realize that's really where you built it. That's where you found out what it is you really wanted it to look like. And you missed that phase even through all the trouble. Story 8. For all the flowery descriptions in literature and gaudy depictions in the media, most people don't know what being in love feels like. And we often mistake 100 other feelings for what we've read or watched about what love is. It's not the need for wanting to constantly talk to somebody. It's not the we have for somebody. It's not because he or she gets crazy in some grand Shakespearean display of emotion when you talk of breaking up or have an argument. It's not because you have kids or because you're married. It's wanting absolutely nothing but for that person to be happy and successful and content for their entire life, regardless of the cost to yourself, no matter how devastating to your own emotions. We ended up with so many toxic relationships because we apply selfishness to desire and convince ourselves it must be love rather than safety, comfort, familiarity, or even control. I mean, if you love something very much, you've got to go easy with it. Give it some room to move around. If you try to hold it tight like that, it'll always try to get away. Harry Cronman. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, it's yours. If it doesn't, it never was. Unknown. The quotes are a bit over the top, but the point remains true. If you can't love somebody who's living a life that doesn't contain you in a central aspect, then it's highly probable that you never loved them but lusted after the idea of them and you. Story 9. That new relationship butterfly feeling will go away. This is where and why most relationships end. To continue to love your partner, it comes down to choice. I've talked to a lot of people in relationships, and they ask me what to do when that fluttering leaves. Also, if you're seriously considering marrying someone, wait at least 5 years. Most will not show their true colors unless 1. You marry them without getting to actually know them, and 2. You wait between 3 to 5 years. Many put a mask on and will keep it on to seem like the perfect mate. Once that persona fades, that's typically when you see that person as they truly are. Still, it comes down to choice and whether to continue to love that person or if they're toxic, narcissistic, cruel, etc. Then it's a different story. Anyway, just from personal experience, I won't lie. Staying with someone for a long time is really difficult. You will fight, you'll hate each other sometimes, but if you're strong enough to make it through the relationship hurdles, it's totally worth it in the end. Story 10. Here, you know what? I got one. Everyone has a freaking baggage. Everyone. Whether that be from trauma, family, friends, work, children, school, etc., etc. It all can be baggage. If you think baggage is just he's got kids and is divorced, LMAO, you're in for a world of hurt. I'm 24 and I ended up knowing this fairly quickly because of my own issues. I told him a lot within the first year we started dating. It was rough. There was arguably a lot and I had no kids, nor was I married before. There just was a lot of crap by the time we started dating. I hold trauma. I hold mental illnesses, primarily anxiety or panic disorder. I got some messed up family issues, etc., etc. He knew, but he still wanted to be with me, and I him, because we wanted to be together, and we still do and are. It's been almost 6.5 years together. Can honestly say, if you think they're too much for you, they aren't the person for you. I guess love is about accepting someone's baggage, even if it's a full suitcase of emotional trauma. Story 11. Some things may be a work in progress forever and always stay around. I have a very bad habit of leaving cups and glasses and mugs everywhere. It seems to have been coming up for the entire 6 years we've been together, and I really have tried working on it, but I never seem to get any better. I set a cup down and it disappears from existence, and then bam, there's suddenly 20 freaking cups everywhere, and it drives me insane too. I swear, cups literally disappear off any plane of reality as soon as you set them down. It's crazy. It does drive him a bit crazy when they're everywhere, though, so I do try to accommodate, you know? He accepts that it may always be a work in progress, but I will still try to work on it as it is a pet peeve, and I totally get it. Both of us accept that cups and glasses and mugs rule this house, and we will just have to find a good way to deal with this craziness for the rest of our lives. Story 12. People don't change because you love them or want them to. It is a two-way communication and consideration. If it's one-sided, then something is wrong. It's not all about your cupcake. You'll both do or have habits that the other person doesn't like. For it to work, there may be a need to compromise. You can get your own way, perhaps, but it can do harm to the relationship. Some people come with mental baggage. You probably do too, so don't be too unkind about it. Not all of them are meant to work or last. Don't do anything that stops you walking away if you aren't happy deep down. Some couples seem to get together through meeting, drinking, and overall only finding each other physically attractive. Have kids and then just stay. Do you want to spend the rest of your life arguing over nothing, enduring jealousy or comforting insecurities? If they're cruel now, they'll still be cruel in 10 or 20 years' time. Story 13. The hardest pill to swallow for me was her telling me her past experiences with other men. Given that I was pure when we got together, I always tended to compare my lack of experience to her experience. It's not something to dwell on because it just consumes you. I felt I needed the urge to explore while her days were behind her. Yet I noticed that the feeling of wanting to explore contradicted my own beliefs and how I run my life. Seems I compared so much to the point where I couldn't even recognize myself. My selfishness kept telling me to go out and do my thing, yet I can't seem to treat people in that way at the end of the night. Value your significant other. Value yourself and be selfless when necessary. Story 14. Sometimes you meet somebody. You talk to them and you talk, and it just comes out and feels so natural and pure. You fall hard for this person, and they fall hard for you. But there are things that prevent you from pursuing the relationship any further. Sometimes it's absolutely meant to be, but you met at the wrong time. You got the short end of the stick, but some people never even get to meet that person. Be grateful for what you can get out of a relationship. Don't mourn over what could have been. The family have happened. Woulda, coulda, and shoulda all have one thing in common. Didn't, and didn't. Focus on what did happen. Appreciate it. And feel happy you got to experience that love or passion for however long that you did. Sometimes you meet the most wonderful person you'll ever meet at the worst possible time. Story 15. The love of your life may not really love you. I was married for nearly 4 decades. One thing I always did was make sure I told the missus, I love you, at least 3 times a day, and not just during intimacy. I noticed that the only time she ever said she loved me was responding to my verbal declaration, I love you too. She never initiated it. One day I decided to see if she really meant it. When she responded with, I love you too, I asked her why. She was flabbergasted. Even at the end of her marriage, she couldn't even give an answer. Not even, I don't know. Sure, maybe she hadn't thought about it before I asked her the first time, but she had over 30 years to come up with an answer. Never did. Never tried the test with our kids, but after my wife and I separated, my granddaughter was visiting. Hug time, and I said, I love you. And she immediately responded with her grandmother's stock reply. So I asked her why, and she didn't miss a beat. Because you're so lovable, Grandpa. Story 16. Just because you both have feelings for each other, it doesn't mean you have to enter some long-term relationship, full-time commitment, and promise each other everything. It is valid to take time and explore and feel each other out. That's what dating is. Also, don't make my mistake and do what I call falling in love with being in love. Like confusing the excitement of being with someone or them being in love with you for actual feelings of love. It is different when you yourself are actually interested in someone. Also, the same goes for anxiety. It is easy to confuse anxious and negative feelings for love, mainly because you've likely been, subconsciously or consciously, conditioned to take those tropes seriously. Taking the breath away, someone absorbing all your attention, easy to get weak, feeling guilt and not wanting to hurt them, taking a projectile for them, and so on. So you think your anxiety around them is just you caring a lot or something like that. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 17. If you're lonely and unhappy, being in a relationship will not actually make you feel much better. Relationships are just partnerships with other people, and it is entirely possible to be lonely and unhappy while dating someone. Ultimately, if you're not alright being by yourself on some level, you will not be okay with being intimate with someone else on the level required or giving them breathing room. Your partner does not exist to fix those things for you or take away your sadness. They just like being around you and love you. This isn't to say your partner can't emotionally support you. They can and probably should to a degree. But I see too many people looking for love because they want to stop feeling lonely. It never goes away until you can make peace with loneliness and work on yourself too. Sure, You may still feel lonely and you may still want to date someone, but if you're unhappy single, you will be unhappy dating too. Love doesn't fix that. Story 18. That in many ways it is more important to work on yourself than the relationship. By that I mean get better at doing the dishes regularly and keep yourself in shape rather than an occasional grand romantic gesture. This is doubly true for attracting a partner. Put the effort into being someone worth dating rather than trying to get dates. If you can't decide whether someone should date you in a way that is just the bare basics for a relationship, i.e., I'm nice, then you need to improve your qualities. And looks matter. Not saying everyone has to really work on it, but don't actively let yourself go. Put that suit on for a date every now and then. Keep basic hygiene. Everyone puts on weight over time, but don't decide that because you got them, you can start eating cake for each meal. Yes, some people struggle with weight for medical reasons, but that isn't an excuse not to try. And to be clear, most people are cool with curves or dad bod. It is letting yourself get obese that is the issue there. Unless you met someone like that. Story 19. They're not going to be the same people you fell in love with for the entire time that you're together. You're going to have to grow and evolve with them. You're going to have to fall in love with them over and over. You're going to have to swallow your frustration if your former night owl partner randomly becomes a morning person while you remain a night person. If they decide to become vegetarian or if they get transferred to a new job within 12-hour shifts, you have to decide whether or not these new developments are deal breakers. Some are obvious, like your partner deciding that they're polyamorous when you're very monogamous, or your partner joining an MLM scheme like Amway, Monat, Color Street, Unique. Some are harder, like you both agreeing on only one child in the future, but now they're saying that they maybe want 2 or 3, or if they really want to go to an intensive grad program 2 hours away. Story 20. It's much easier, and in many solid ways much better if you come into a relationship similar in many ways. That doesn't have to mean culture or race or nationality, although many aspects of personalities are tied to these things. What I mean is love language, idea of cleanliness, general political philosophy, how to resolve an argument, big things. I had a long relationship with someone who was a really good person, but he was just not affectionate. He did his best to do what I needed, and I did my best to accept that he showed he liked me in other ways. Realistically, I spent years feeling clingy and ugly, and he felt years feeling annoyed and more reluctant to show love. When I met and started dating my current boyfriend, 3.5 years, he was affectionate. So was I. He needed alone time sometimes, so he understood when I did too. He'd be clinically depressed and got it in a way nobody else ever has. At least nobody I've lived with. It was weird too. He was open to dark and light stuff in the same conversation too, relevant to my job. If I love someone, I will work with them. And there's absolutely a trope that relationships take. I can't argue with that. But I can't express how easy and joyful it has been to find someone with whom I never have to have the "please don't yell at me, sorry I'm messy, let's work on resolving this another way" conversation in the first place. We've had our share of arguments, enough to know that I can communicate with them, but all of the little differences that can get between us just doesn't exist. So we start from a simple, good place. It's simple and good along the way, and by the time we hit a bump, no little resentments have built up. That turned into a novel, but I just wanted to say, it's okay to acknowledge that working harder for a relationship doesn't make it better. I sometimes feel bad saying this to friends because on the surface, it sounds like we're not willing to work for each other at all, but actually, what it means is that we lucked into a smooth and not a bumpy road. If you can find someone you love and who is similar to you in large and small ways, I encourage you to do so. Story 21. An oversimplification to be sure, but for both partners, it's a love me, love my problems kind of thing. This is within reason, and I don't personally think it applies to things like bad habits, as in enabling them. But some people don't want to deal whatsoever with someone else's misfortune, hardship, general troubles, etc. If you won't stand with them when they're down, when the relationship is going to take a hard swing at your uncomplicated life, then what's the point of the relationship? Relationships are all pretty easy to manage when life is swell, but the true measure of the quality of your partner and the strength of the relationship is how you manage to support one another when it gets hard. And don't ever keep score. One of you may invariably need to lean on the other more often, and that's fine. Take some comfort in knowing that at times, you may well be the only good thing going for another person. Story 22. You're not always going to feel madly in love with your partner. You're not always going to like your partner. But you should always have respect and be respected by your partner. There are going to be tense, awful days and grief and loss and huge fights and really awkward times where you just don't feel like you're aligned. It's natural. Humans are bad at being around other people sometimes, and you might need time alone or a break. Not in a we were on a break kind of way, but spending time with family, taking a night away with friends, not being around your partner 24/7 way. It's okay to feel angry or frustrated or numb towards your partner sometimes. Constantly fighting for that butterflies feeling or that almost obsessive crushing you had month one of being together when it's year five now isn't reasonable. A real relationship is going to have times where you feel bad feelings about your partner. It's going to get tough, but you stick with it because you love them and have enough mutual respect for each other that you work through rough times and treasure the good ones. Story 23. No matter how close you are and how many views you seem to share, you'll still always be very different people with different histories, beliefs, perceptions, interpretations, preferences, values, etc. Despite our common threads as humans, everybody thinks differently, feels differently, and sees things differently. And in that respect, you're no closer to your partner than you are to any other random person in the world. We are so connected, and yet the divide runs deep. And that's the case even with your own partner. We have a tendency to naturally assume that others see things the same way as we do, no matter how intellectually aware we might be that this is not the case. And that goes extra for those who are closer to us. Unfortunately, those are the people of whom it's most important we remain cognizant do not see things the same way as us. Story 24. Attention does not equal love, and vice versa. During the first two of 24 years, and counting, I struggled with insecurities, jealousy, self-doubt, all wrapped up in the guise of, you don't love me because he wanted to go do stuff without me. Oh, what a dummy I was. The relationship hit a crisis point when he decided it all meant that I didn't trust him. Strangely, I knew that wasn't it, but I couldn't figure out how to convince him. I even tried saying the words out loud to myself to see if it fit, but I only felt more certain that it was wrong. At that point, I realized that I needed to redefine my expectations of love and maybe try to be a bit less selfish. From there, I began a long and rewarding journey of understanding. Because I trusted him, I decided to see what would happen if I began to rely on his actions to tell me how he felt, rather than relying on whatever the most recent words or gifts or sacrifices he gave. It was hard to swallow the fact that my idea of what love is had been wrong all along. That idea was very selfish. Fortunately, love is far more enriched and satisfying for me now than the movies or books or songs led me to believe when I was younger. Story 25. The hardest one of all. Romantic love does not solve deep-seated pain, insecurity, previous attachment wounds, and existential loneliness. Many people assume that when they find a partner and get a commitment and have this other person love them, that they will feel validated and loved and reassured and safe. Sadly, relationships stoke insecurity as much as they fulfill. For example, people who, as children, have been treated in such a way as to feel they are intrinsically flawed and unlovable will often look to relationships to fill that void. But instead, they often develop all sorts of painful defense strategies. Examples are unmanaged jealousy, or testing behaviors, or control, etc., etc. We all have relational traumas, and it is painful and confusing to find that romantic love does not heal our wounds, but rather is infected by them. In order to have a really good relationship, one must first have some degree of insight into one's traumas and have achieved a certain measure of healing. Story 26. I see a lot of people say that they don't want to be an option. They want to be the only one. I wish that could be true, but you are always an option, and it takes work to be the best. Especially today where dating is so easy to get into if you know how. It can be quite a rotation. I cynically say that you should keep an eye out for new people so when your partner decides to let you know they have someone else and are going to move on immediately, you won't be standing there alone wondering what the hell happened. I hate it. I wish it wasn't so, but it is the current year. I'm about to be downvoted by people who know it is true but are so deluded by fantasy. You are always an option and easily replaced. It isn't fair, but that's how it is. Story 27. In many relationships, one person ends up being the adult and the other the child. The adult thinks about what they say carefully. The child stream of conscious spouts crap without thinking about how it will make the other feel. The child often thinks that their opinions are facts. The child acts out emotionally in response to the smallest of things. The child is focused on what they want and does not take others into consideration. The child makes the mess but leaves it for someone else to clean. The child assumes others think the same as they do. The worst part is that many people who are the child in a relationship will read this and immediately decide it applies more to the other person than themselves or that it applies to other people. They will not be self-critical. You have to regularly ask yourself if you're the child and change to maintain a healthy relationship. Story 28.
If you have to show up and put in work every single day to meet your partner's expectations or needs, or on the flip side, if one of you has expectations the other isn't meeting but you let it slide, that's not the solution for long-term happiness. You're not a good fit. You'll get tired, you'll get worn down, resentment will grow over time. One of you will have a bad day and lose their patience. That formula just can't last forever. To be clear, there will be times your partner asks or needs you to be a better, bigger person. They ask you to grow. Those are so valuable. Don't ignore them. It takes work though, so it just can't be 24/7, 365. However, there will be someone out there who has expectations you can meet without trying, and they'll do the same for you. Now you're talking about being comfortable together for a long time. Story 29. Romanticism isn't always the same idea for both parties. It can also change as we get older. It certainly isn't the same idea for outsiders. Don't let folks outside your relationship decide for you what is acceptable thoughtfulness. And notice and acknowledge things that are thoughtful. I had a flat tire when I got off work. Husband was at the restaurant across town waiting for me to join him. I called to let him know and he said holler if I needed him. Outsiders thought it was atrocious that he didn't drop what he was doing to come change my tire for me. Yet I'm perfectly capable of doing it myself. And I've had to do before. Plus, he had our table and drinks ordered already. Yeah, when I pick up a night shift and he's home, he's offered to come pick me up. It's a 30-mile drive one way. If I'm too sleepy to drive. Then he stays outside or does quiet things when I day sleep. Or when I picked up extra shifts, I would come home to him having the back patio with a fire pit going and steaks in the grill so I can unwind. He respects my independence. I appreciate that, but he compliments my needs. Story 30. True love is not going to save you from your problems. Your partner can be a source of support and encouragement while you save your own, but ultimately, the burden of labor is on you. When you're first dating someone, pay attention to how they treat others, because that's how they will eventually treat you. Understand that you will not always be some special exception to their general attitudes and behaviors. The most enduring partner is not always the most exciting one. Whatever your superficial preferences, they mean almost nothing compared to having someone dependable and safe and loving throughout decades. Relationships need to be built upon shared values. Love may start with feelings, but it's sustained by action. Sometimes you won't feel like being loving. Sometimes you won't feel like it for a really long time. If you want the relationship to last, you have to keep doing it until you feel like doing it again. I think this is one of the hardest things for people to put into action. When you're at your most angry, exhausted, grief-stricken, or hurt, that is the time that it's most critical to be loving. Babies change everything and are a total crapshoot. Do not rush that decision. This is what I've gleaned from 19 years in a stable and loving relationship and 1 year as a new parent. Story 31. This one's more lighthearted, but not one I considered beforehand. If you love someone and you end up living with them, especially if you're sharing a bed, know that at some point you and or they will wake the other up accidentally or inadvertently. And sleepy people can be very grumpy sometimes. Things said when you're in your hazy, just woke up phase are not true. My best personal example. Both my boyfriend and I are the type to set like 6 alarms in the morning, but often work different days. We have each taken turns sleeping through our alarms while the other lies there getting woken up every 15 minutes. Then you eventually shake your SO awake and go, "Hey, I love you, but get the hell up." Just remember, it's not personal. They still love you, and if grumpies happens, if anything, it's almost instinctual to be a total schmuck over interrupted sleep. Just reconvene and apologize after you've fully woken up and gained some clarity. Story 32. Life goals should be addressed earlier on than you think. Don't wait until you're engaged to talk about things like whether or not you want kids, whether you're a family-oriented or a career-oriented person, etc. As a woman who doesn't want kids and is very career-oriented, this has ruined multiple relationships that were otherwise good. And unfortunately, these issues weren't addressed until years later because we don't need to worry about it now. No, you don't need to worry about it now, but regardless of whether you're family or career-oriented, whether you want kids or not, if your significant other feels differently, there's not much of a chance they'll change their mind for a genuine reason. I know people change their minds, but chances are it'll be because they want you to stay with them, not because they actually want it. And all that does is breed resentment and unhappiness for one or both of you. Story 33. Friendships. If you have a gripe with someone, please, for the love of God, don't think it's okay to bring it up anywhere that isn't in person. I've been in and seen multiple long, awful fights with people, and they've always started on Messenger because nobody has the guts to bring these up in person. People say whatever they want unfiltered. It's a disaster because while being able to say these things can have its positive side, ultimately you don't really see their humanity because you're having a debate with your phone. You can't see your friend flinching when you say something hurtful, and they can't see you getting mad as they tell you you're acting like a schmuck the other day. Story 34. Instant fairytale partners do not exist. You find someone you gel with, someone you'd consider a best friend, and evolve together. Learn from each other, teach new things, and understand each other. I have regular conversations with someone I know, which always consist of her finding a hot guy. He says one wrong thing, so she yells at him and drops him. She then tells me that he didn't understand her. Communication works both ways. She laments how she'll never have a relationship as happy as mine and my husband's, but doesn't listen when I remind her we've known each other for a decade and a half. We worked at a relationship. We were friends first. We shouldn't be hero worshipped. Point is, crappy dating apps can give the impression that you just need to reach basic compatibility like The Sims to have a relationship. Don't set yourself up for disappointment. Story 35. Sometimes your partner is going to make a decision that you strongly disagree with. You simply can't sympathize with the way they're treating the situation. The only thing you can do is to accept this decision. Respect them as a person and show support, no matter how awful it is. People are people, and at points in their lives you just have to do something no matter what our surroundings might think. As long as this decision isn't meant to harm someone directly, you just have to swallow it, even if you can't understand it. This goes both ways, of course. Respect your partner for the human they are and your own ideal of them. If you can't respect, accept, and support your partner, you're better off without each other. Story 36. There's a subtle but recognizable difference between not wanting to talk about something versus wanting to process my feelings before responding emotionally instead of logically to what may be perceived as an attack. Understand and accept that a partner may have a different road that leads them to respond in an argument. Some people naturally want to talk things out and say whatever they're feeling, regardless of the implications. Others, myself included, would prefer to take the time before hitting back a hurtful comment just because we felt threatened. My go-to response is always, I understand and respect how important this is to you, and I want to talk about it, but I'm not in the right headspace to do that fairly right now. The key to this is setting the time to revisit the issue and sticking to that timetable. Story 37. You should not be anxious about the relationship all the time. You shouldn't be stressed about if they love you or if they're going to leave you or if they're out cheating on you or what they're thinking. It shouldn't be a major source of stress. In fact, if it's a good partnership, both of your lives should be easier. The old adage about relationships being hard work isn't really accurate. Being with them shouldn't be hard or a battle. It's more accurate to say that a good relationship takes effort. Like you should both be striving for open communication, handle conflict in a healthy way, make each other happy, but it shouldn't be exhausting or hard or stressful to be with them. They should be a source of comfort. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.